What's going on? There was a great interview on Squawk on the Street with David Faber and Carl Quintanilla with the founder and old CEO of Zillow, Spencer Rascoff, currently promoting his new company, Picasso, which is a really cool idea. We'll get into another video. But Spencer talked a lot of things about real estate trends, where he sees the market going, and why certain things are happening. One of my favorite books I read recently was his book, Zillow Talk, which gives great insight into the real estate market and all the data behind it. This data is so important that Zillow is able to compile. You can really make insightful decisions on what to do for your personal real estate. Let's take a look at the interview that I just had with Spencer yesterday, and I'll give you kind of my insight into what I think. It's a great question they asked Spencer here about what's driving the market. We talked about it a little bit on prior videos about undersupply in the last 10 years, and Spencer has a great answer to why we have such a low supply today.
What's really driving the housing market right now is not actually tax policy. It's not the Biden proposal, and it's not even state-by-state differences. It's limited inventory. So if you think for a second, over the last 4 decades, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, about 26 million homes were built every decade. So for 40 years of 25 to 26 million homes built. In the 2010s, only 6 million homes were built in the United States. So there's a 20 million home gap of houses that just don't exist, which would have existed in past decades. That's why home prices are increasing so quickly. And tax policy, sure, it has a difference on the margins, but the real issue and what's really driving home value appreciation is limited inventory because of lack of new construction.
This is one of my favorite pieces from the whole interview. They talk about certain trends. Spencer says people are untethered from where they work in their corporate headquarters, and they're also driven to live where they want to have the best lifestyle. And he coined a new term, lifestyle-driven demand, and we're seeing a lot of that and a lot of movement throughout the country, people moving to certain areas where they can have the best lifestyle for themselves.
What are you seeing in terms of trends right now? Spencer, we talk so often about people leaving high-tax states. Perhaps that is one reason. Obviously, weather can be another. I mean, is this exodus for real? Do you expect it to go on? And what are you seeing in those markets such as Florida or Texas where there seems to be a great deal of demand?
Yeah, so people are untethered from their corporate headquarters, and that's causing a lot of people to want to move. You don't have to be in a particular city anymore. People are voting with their feet, and they're choosing to move to different places.
Carl drops a bomb in this interview, which isn't really talked about much, in saying that we could be undersupplied for the next 7 to 8 years. And Spencer kind of gives his thoughts on the adjustments that are going to have to be made between current homeowners and new first-time home buyers.
Spencer, you talk about limited supply. Wells did a report a couple weeks ago where they argue that we're just laying the foundation for this cycle. They say there's a long tail ahead, demand support for 2.3 million through the rest of the decade, with supply consensus at 1.5. Do you think that's legit? Could we be talking about this for the next 7 or 8 years?
Well, the problem is that just when we were starting to build houses, COVID happened. And commodity prices have gone through the roof. I mean, the price of lumber now is about 3 to 4x what it was a year ago. So, I mean, I'm talking to builders all across the country where they're abandoning projects and selling them to individuals instead of completing the projects because it's become so expensive for them to build because of commodity prices. So, I hope that we are able to solve this inventory shortage through more new construction. What probably ends up happening, though, is first-time home buyers decide to continue renting. Because remember, if you're an existing home buyer and you already own a home and you're selling and buying, you actually have appreciated equity that you can trade into the new home. If you're a first-time home buyer, so you're a renter, you don't have that advantage. So the way this probably normalizes is a little bit with new construction, but also with first-time home buyers deciding to continue to rent because they can't afford to make that leap to buy.
There are 3 key takeaways from this interview which I find really impactful. Number 1, we're severely undersupplied in the market, and over the last decade, we just did not build enough homes. Number 2, being a current homeowner is going to give you a big leg up on being able to buy a house because you have equity in your house. Being a new home buyer is going to be a challenge because you have to acquire enough capital to put for a down payment without rolling forward any of your old equity. Number 3, people are living where they want to live, where they're going to have their best lifestyle. People no longer have to live and work in the same location. However, JP Morgan basically just ordered everybody back to the office. I don't know where we'll be in 2 or 3 years, but for the time being, there's been a massive shift in people living where they want to live.